Do you know who I am? I'm Arya Stark. Do you know who you are? You're nothing.
Arya Stark once again personally eliminated an enemy from her death list. In the winding, sea breeze-filled streets of Braavos, Arya was on a mission from Jaqen, preparing to assassinate a gambler who sold marine insurance. All she needed to do was pour deadly poison into the oysters the gambler frequently ate, and he would quietly pass away. But just as Arya had everything ready, her body seemed to be pulled by an invisible force. She unconsciously stopped, her gaze fixed on the direction of the docks. There, a small sailboat was slowly approaching the shore. It was exactly as instructed by the thin man previously, Mace Tyrell, coming to Braavos to discuss debts with the Iron Bank on behalf of the royal family and attempting to stall for time. However, in Arya's eyes, there was only one person, the arrogant Kingsguard, Meryn Trant, who was accompanying him. This man, who had participated in the betrayal of her father, Arya Stark, and had also killed her dancing master, Syrio Forel, had been on Arya's death list for a long time, so the girl forgot the task Jaqen had given her and stood up, following Meryn without taking her eyes off him. Although the flame of revenge burned fiercely in her heart, Arya was as cautious as a cat by the canal, patiently and silently looking for an opportunity. Death had brought her enemy before her eyes. She knew she had to plan carefully and seize the chance to strike a fatal blow. After accompanying Mace to complete the lengthy and dull visit to the Iron Bank, Meryn and several Lannister guards, filled with resentment, eagerly rushed towards the most dazzling and alluring brothels in Braavos, eager to experience the taste of this foreign land. Arya remained like a shadow. She skillfully disguised herself as a poor girl carrying a basket, selling oysters, and sneaked deeper into the brothel. However, she was stopped by the guards, who shooed her away like a dog, telling her to sell elsewhere. Fortunately, Arya had befriended many regular customers while selling oysters in the streets and alleys. The prostitute Lara was one of them. Seeing Arya, she greeted her warmly, claiming that oysters were good at stirring up men's desires. So, the guards temporarily allowed Arya to move through the brothel selling her wares. Arya seized the opportunity, pretending to be nonchalant as she moved towards the back rooms. Through the blinds of a room, in the dim light, she saw Meryn choosing prostitutes. The madam brought out several mature and scantily clad girls, but Meryn disliked them all, finding them too old. Although the madam thought she had brought out the youngest and most beautiful girls, with eyes full of charm and high prices, Meryn was still not satisfied, pouting and complaining that they weren't tender enough. The madam's mind turned, and she secretly understood Meryn's twisted preference for young girls in their early teens. While she went out to search, Arya, who was peeking from outside the door, was grabbed by a Lannister guard. However, the guard only wanted to buy some oysters. Without explanation, she forcibly pulled Arya into the room. When Meryn's gaze swept over Arya, for a moment she seemed to sense something, as if she had seen this girl somewhere before. Arya's heart was already in her throat, but she could only hold her breath and feign composure. Just then, the madam also appeared, shooing Arya away and bringing a girl about Arya's age. Seeing the girl standing there, looking genuinely bewildered with innocent eyes, Meryn finally nodded with satisfaction, his voice rough. He even shamelessly asked the madam to bring a new one tomorrow. Arya witnessed everything and immediately conceived a plan to deal with Meryn. Back at the House of Black and White, Arya, having returned empty-handed, faced Jaqen's questions. She could only lie, saying the gambler wasn't hungry that day and didn't buy her oysters, promising to complete the task tomorrow. Although Jaqen was slightly suspicious of Arya's words, he didn't show it and let her proceed with her next move. The next day, in that most meticulously crafted yet corrupt brothel, Meryn Trant was wantonly selecting from 3 newly brought girls. Holding a stick with a twisted definition of pleasure, he mercilessly whipped the girls' backs, letting their screams echo through the room. Facing Meryn's abuse, the first 2 girls cried out endlessly, but only the last girl seemed like a block of wood, completely unresponsive to the pain. Seeing this, Meryn hit her harder. When the girl still didn't make a sound, he immediately became interested, telling the other 2 to leave, stating that he had found a suitable candidate for today. The remaining girl, with her hair uncovered, was actually the waif whom Arya had personally sent away from the House of Black and White earlier. Meryn's flailing fist slammed hard into the girl's stomach. The girl instantly fell to her knees, letting out a few muffled gasps. But in an instant, a sudden change occurred. When the girl looked up, she had transformed into Arya Stark. With a flash of light, the dagger in Arya's hand plunged into Meryn's eye like lightning. The Kingsguard cried out in agony and fell to the ground unexpectedly. Arya then mercilessly pulled it out and plunged it into his other eye socket, not forgetting to pull up his clothes to stuff his mouth to prevent him from screaming and attracting others. Amidst horrifying wet thuds, Arya repeatedly stabbed Meryn in the chest. Blood splattered. Arya Stark stood up, leaned close to Meryn, and with words like daggers revealed her true identity. The girl who had once escaped from under his gaze, the student of Syrio Forel, the sword master he had killed. Amidst Meryn's pained sobs, Arya contemptuously spat out, "You're nothing!" Then with a swift stroke, she slowly drew the blade across his throat, just as they had beheaded her father, Eddard Stark, in front of the great sept of Baelor that day. After exacting her revenge, Arya returned to the House of Black and White in the Hall of Faces and returned the fake face she had used to disguise herself. The corners of her mouth unconsciously turned up, as if she was still savoring the action she thought she had kept secret. However, Jaqen and the waif were already waiting for her there, their faces grim. The girl had taken a life that was not hers to take, and she had not completely abandoned her original identity. She had to pay for this. The waif flashed, grabbing Arya. Jaqen unhurriedly took out a small bottle filled with poison and held it to Arya's mouth, stating that only death could repay life. But to Arya's surprise, Jaqen himself tilted his head back and drank the poison. Then he fell stiffly to the ground. Arya immediately broke down, screaming desperately for Jaqen to live, crying and saying he was her friend. Suddenly, Jaqen's voice echoed from behind her. Arya turned around in astonishment to see the waif now wearing Jaqen's face. The waif said calmly, "The person lying on the ground is no one. A faceless man must learn to see the world with their mind." What was about to happen to Arya was both punishment and training. Arya, filled with doubt, reached out with a trembling hand to the face of the person lying on the ground, peeling off face after face. Finally, she saw her own face. Immediately after, Arya's vision began to blur, her eyeballs gradually turning a horrifying white until she could see nothing at all. She screamed in despair, begging for help, but the only response was the dead silence of the Hall of Faces.